Okay, I think we are ready to start. First of all, thank you very much for attending this session. It's the last one of the day. So I was having my doubts about how many people were going to be attending today. So thank you. And we are going to allow questions at the end of the talk, because I really enjoy when people ask questions and we can share our experiences both in sport and what the sport also helps us realizing in our professional lives, but also in leadership, engineering leadership as a whole. So we're going to start with a presentation. My name is Marta. I'm a software engineer by trade, although I do not write code for quite some years now. I'm a marathoner as well, and I am passionate about technology, running, obviously, books, and chocolates. And that's a piece of information I always give people who have worked with me, and I know that some of you have. They know how to bribe me sometimes, bringing me chocolate. I am currently serving as CTO in Olaluz. You might know the company. We are based here in Barcelona. We are a green tech company, which we are trying to make the world a better place by disrupting the way energy is produced and consumed with the best technology. This talk is not addressed to runners. So in fact, I'm not going to be using technical terms that we runners use a lot. I also know that in software engineering, we are sometimes guilty of using a lot of jargon. Well, software engineers use jargon, runners use even worse jargon, so I will try not to do so, because this is not for runners. This is for IT professionals who have, like me, struggled with the reality of tech leadership, engineering, and especially agile transformations. Okay, so we're going to actually start with the context and what happened. I will explain you the initial idea, and then we are slowly going to go through the process I went through, realizing that my experience in the Arctic was actually quite similar to my experience leading transformations and engineering teams. Might seem weird, but actually it's not. So the context. In August 2021, COVID times, I had the wonderful idea to train and run a marathon in freezing conditions above the polar Arctic Circle in, and forgive me, I do not know if I pronounce this properly, Kangerlussuaq in Greenland. And in the process, as I was explaining, and to my surprise, I discovered a lot of analogies with my experience leading engineering teams. Some analogies that I found reinforced what I already believed, but some challenged my own approach. I wanted to also start with a sentence by Roald Amundsen. You might know who he was. He was a polar explorer from Norway. And, well, he was the first to reach the South Pole in the epic race with Scott. And he is quoted as saying, "Adventure is just bad planning." And my God, was he right? So I thought that going to Greenland was going to be an adventure, but I didn't want to be a bad adventure. So I set myself on, I'm going to plan this. So what I did is, first, I created my vision. And I created my vision because I knew that it was going to be some months of training in the COVID times. So I needed to know why I was doing it. And, well, I had a lot of friends asking me, but why on earth are you going to put yourself through that, like training, and then going running in a very difficult environment, freezing conditions, ice, and paying money? I mean, and you're not a professional athlete. I'm not going to win any money, right? Like, why on earth are you doing this? So to make sure that I didn't have my doubts, I created my vision, right? And I said, well, what I want to do is I want to complete under the time limit, because imagine as well, you pay all the money, you go to Greenland, and then you do not complete the marathon under the cutoff time. I didn't want this to happen. So that was the complete under the time limit, the Polar Arctic Circle Marathon on October the 31st. And this is something I'm also used to do in Agile transformations or big transformations. Now, could be also cloud transformations or DevOps transformations. When you are leading teams that are asked to embark on a transformation journey, I found it very useful to have this vision. Because along the way, when you're training or when you are in the middle of migration, let's say, sometimes you forget, why are you doing this? So always keep the vision in there. And two things that I have learned in the past was the vision needs to be inspirational, yes, to keep the stamina, but it needs to be feasible. And I'm sure that you all have been through so-called transformations that are dictated by senior management that they say, oh yeah, we're just going to be agile. That's actually a real story. We're going to be agile by next year. Why? Because I say so, because I'm the CEO. So I say that we're going to be agile without understanding what agile really means. And you make it happen. So you have like 12 months to be agile. So I didn't want to occur this problem. So I said, okay, so my own vision, my personal vision is going to be feasible and it's going to be inspirational. So I thought I have set off myself for success, right? And here I even created this kind of like postcard from the future that I call. That is this, it's aspirational, yet it's realistic, it's achievable, right? It's motivational enough to engage others on the journey. In my case, it was not only me, it was my poor husband, who I asked him to go with me and run the marathon. So the result is that the teams, we start thinking about how to apply these strengths in order to achieve the goal. So, well, I was very happy, right? I started with the vision. I even did a gap analysis. And the gap analysis is something I'm also used to do in my Agile transformations and so on. Because sometimes it helps just to sit down and think about things. And you realize that, especially in professional environments, there are a lot of things that you take for granted. And then when you sit down and say like, oh, okay, so these are my strengths. When you ask your teams, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? You are very surprised by this exercise. So in this case, my strengths were that I had strong experience as a runner. I'm not a super fast runner, but I was not bad. I could run a marathon under 4 hours without problem. My weaknesses were that I had an history of injuries, recent, so I had some problems in my back. And also I had no previous experience in running in cold climates whatsoever, other than in London when it was, because I used to live in London when it was snowing, but it's not the same, right? I was at the time living in Barcelona, so my experience was close to zero. The threats during the process were then the climate in Barcelona, because yes, it was winter. Well, actually, it was summer because the half marathon and marathon were in October, so I had to train over summer in Barcelona. So I was like, well, I had to be super careful that the injuries would not reappear. So I had to be especially careful in the training. And as opportunities, funnily enough, I listed the COVID situation because at the time I was working remotely, so I had more time to train, and the city was kind of empty. There were not too many tourists. And if you run in Barcelona, you know that tourists at this time of the year, if you try to go running in Barcelona, sometimes it's impossible because you have to, try to skip the tourists. It's just difficult. So after the gap analysis, right, I created my roadmap. And you are going to be very familiar, I think, with this roadmap because you've seen it also from high management, right? What I did is I did my product increments, so I could check my fitness status, let's say. So I would say, so depending on how well I would train for a few weeks, how fast I could go, then I could increase the training, do a little bit of tapering, so rest. So I had my date, it was a fixed date, I couldn't change it. So it was a roadmap driven by a fixed milestone. And this is something as well that probably you're familiar. There are two types of transformations. the ones that have a fixed milestone and the ones that is a fixed scope, let's say. The two of them, senior management, they try to embed everything in it, and also the quality. But in my experience, it's either, well, if you want to have something by this date with this quality, you have to compromise in the scope. If you want this scope, then as per the Agile methodology, you will see if you can reach the milestone or not. So in this case, I was like, okay, at least I have to be fit to finish the marathon at a certain pace. So I had my plan. It was only 2 weeks, so it was quite fast, right? And I thought that because I was such an experienced Agile coach in my former life, and I was so experienced in Agile transformations, and I had catered for all of this, I was like, yeah, I will be very successful in Greenland. No injuries, I was lucky. So, what metrics I was using? And the question of metrics in Agile transformations, probably you also are very familiar with management asking you, we need to be data-driven. We need to be data-driven. We need to have the metrics. And then when the engineering team say, well, these metrics mean nothing, then management says, of course they do mean something. It's very important, our customers, and blah, blah, blah. So in this case, I was the engineering team, and I was the manager, was all of it. So I was so sure that the metrics were the ones that were right, because that's the metric that I've always used in all my marathons, my previous marathons. I've been successful, and it's the average pace. If you can run 10K at this pace, if you can run a half marathon at this pace, then you can run, and you do the long runs at a certain pace, then you're set, right? So I thought that this KPI was meaningful to control my own progress and to adapt training, as I was explaining before. But, and this is a kind of a spoiler, right? It was a mistake, because what I didn't realize is that I was going to run in very different conditions. So my previous experience in running marathons maybe didn't apply. And you might think, well, yeah, Marta, it was kind of obvious, but actually it's not, because it happens as well in engineering, right? You are an engineer. You've done that. You've done this small project, or you've done this project for this customer. You know better, right? Then it's a different customer, but the metrics are the metrics, right? I know it. So I think sometimes we are so set in what has worked for us in the past, especially in management, right, that then we don't realize that you can be wrong, right? So this famous or infamous embrace change that you will recognize from the Agile, I will explain it in a second, right? It means a lot. That is, this for me, it's the true spirit of Agile. It's not these ceremonies. It's not the even empowering of the teams. I don't think that's the Agile per se, right? It's the fact that Agile gives you a mindset to embrace change. And sometimes you are so into the logistics of Agile, and you're so worried about, am I doing Agile well? Am I having all of the ceremonies? Am I having all the KPIs? My burn down chart. I have worked for customers where, and also I being the customer, where like we were reviewing all of the burn down charts and the velocities and everything, right? And we were losing sight that the most important thing in Agile is the mindset, the flexibility to adapt to change, right? So, what happened when we arrived to Greenland? So the organization changed the course. Apparently, the people who pay a lot of money and go to Greenland, what they really like is the adventure, is the challenge. So what they really like is running on the ice cap. So my assumption was, because it was in the web and because of previous editions, was that it was going to be 2-3 kilometers on the ice cap. So I was thinking, well, 2 kilometers, then 40 kilometers on terrain, right? It's not going to make much difference. Most of the race is going to be on trail. I've done trail. Yeah, it's going to be freezing and whatever, but I'm just going to be covered, right? But they changed the course, and it was 7 kilometers on the ice cap. That's the ice cap. That's me, right? That's me inspecting the course. So the day before, the organization took us on a tour to inspect the course. 2 days in advance, actually, not the day before, 2 days in advance. And that was like nothing I've seen before. You could not even walk. Maybe people from Norway or from Svalbard or whatever, they were actually doing better. But for me, it was like I was falling down, I couldn't walk. That's me trying to like survive. And it became so clear that all of the training that we have done meant nothing. Because, well, if I cannot even walk, how am I supposed to run? But the worst thing was that 7 kilometers on the ice cap, it's really hard on your legs. It punishes your legs in a way that I was not used to. So then having to run 35 kilometers with your legs destroyed, not a good idea, right? So then 2 days before, we had let's say a gathering with my husband, right? And we did the pros and cons. So the weather conditions also were worse than expected. It was bloody freezing, excuse my French. The big layers of thick snow, it was extremely slippery. Our spikes as well were not the ones that we should have bought because they were like super tiny spikes. And you need like proper spikes, the metal ones. And the course was not flat. So in there, I think it's when I had like this realization, right? My husband said, Marta, let's run the half marathon. We are here. I think we can finish the half marathon. There is no way we can finish the full marathon. And I was very upset. I was very upset because I have my runner pride, right? I'm a marathon runner. I'm not a half marathon runner. Marathon runner. I came all this way to run the real thing, right? Half marathon is for losers. What are you saying, right? But then I was thinking, there is a time limit. And again, I'm not a slow runner, but if I was going to spend 3 hours on the ice cap, there is no way I'm going to finish under the limit. And the organization were saying, no, there are a lot of people who do not finish. Yeah, a lot of people. I mean, you need to be trained. So using the latest KPIs, which were what we discovered on the course, we decided to adapt the vision, and we decided to run the half marathon instead. And when I was doing this process of simulation, let's say, is when I really realized that this was a lesson for me also in professional life. Because I was talking about my pride as a runner, but all of us have pride as engineers. All of us have, well, if you don't, I would be very surprised, right? All of us have pride as IT professionals. We've been here for a long time. We know what we are doing. So imagine if you are responsible for the project. It's difficult. If you have been working in a project for, let's say, 2 years, to say, we have to change course, we have to change the vision. It's so difficult. And we might be following Agile and the Scrum and the this and the that, but what Scrum gives you is the ability to change. Because you are working in product increments. You can say, okay, well, we're going to see what we can use. We're just going to change course. You're not tied like you were in the past with a project. The scope is closed, is signed. We have to deliver this to the customer. Otherwise, the customer is not paying. Right? But we sometimes not make use of Agile. We are scared. We are frustrated, very frustrated, because that was not the vision. And I distinguish between startups and small companies and projects where you are a main stakeholder. So you are, as I was here, you are the engineer, but you're also a main stakeholder. Then it's where you're pride, and you are very frustrated because you say, this is not what I was planning to do. And then the other one, where you have an external customer asking you, where then you need to convince the customer. Maybe you are then convinced yourself, but then you need to explain this realization to your customers, right? And that's difficult. So I think that was probably the main lesson I learned in there was, wow, let's really understand what Agile gives us as engineers, because 20, 25 years ago, right, it was much more difficult. So the hard part, though, it's implementing the decision, not making it. Once we had decided to run the half, that's us running the half marathon. That's the terrain, that's the conditions, and I don't know if you can see, but in the shoes we were wearing, you cannot really see the spikes, and that's not a good thing. If we were wearing the proper spikes, you would see it in there. We're wearing Call Avengers for the call, so the gear was correct at least. At least we got this right. But it was a difficult race, let's say. So it became clear that the metrics had not been right? Pace was not even in the question, so running the half marathon proved the correct decision. We were able to finish the half marathon in 3 hours, 15 minutes. So now you can guess, if I can run a marathon in the city in 1 hour, 45 minutes, we used 3 hours, 15 minutes for the half marathon. There is no way we would have finished the marathon in 6 hours, 30. Because if you know about running and marathons, running the half in 3 hours, 15 does not mean that you're going to run the second half in the same time. So we would have run in 7 hours, we would have not finished. So at least we got this right as well. There is also something that I also learned in there, and this was while running the half marathon. And this is also, it was a lesson for me. Because again, I like to pride myself of being a good leader, whatever that means. But I like to think that I'm not a boss who doesn't listen. I like to think I listen to my engineers. And that I do not put necessary pressure and all of that. Anyway, so as I mentioned before, right, I was running the half marathon with my husband, with this guy here. And we were working as a team, because it was not the kind of race that you just go by yourself, right? We went there together, we're going to finish together. So the result, my result, depended on his result. We were a team. We had decided we were a team. Like the projects at work, right? It's teamwork. If there is one part of the project, if there is one engineer that is not working well, the whole project is affected. So after we ran on the ice cap, then we had 7 minus 20, so we had 14 kilometers to run on very, very hilly terrain and very slippery terrain. And it was also very hard on the legs because it was slippery, so we were falling down. I do not even remember how many times I fell down. I was like, phew, phew. So it was risk of injury, so you had to be super alert. And it was very hilly, apart that it was freezing cold. So the legs were very tired from the ice cap, so we were struggling. So it was around kilometer maybe 15 or so that my husband started struggling, and he started to walk when we were going up. Okay. Then at kilometer 17, 18, probably, he was walking, and I was feeling slightly better. So I was like, okay, we can just walk and run. We can just walk and run. And this has happened to us in the past, that sometimes one of us is faster, so it says we can walk and run. So it was not something unexpected, let's say. So I was like, come on, we can walk and run, and he was not answering. Normally, if I say we can walk and run, if he can walk and run, he will walk and run. And if he cannot work and run because he's tired, he's not feeling well, or for whatever reason, he will tell me, Marta, no, I'm walking, right? But he was saying nothing. So I was thinking, okay, that means he's okay with it, right? So we keep going, and I start putting a lot of pressure on him because I could see the goal, the finish line at the end. At the end was like 2 hills in there. It was maybe 2 kilometers, but I could see the finish race, right? So I was like putting a lot of pressure on him because also I was upset. I was still upset that we were running the half marathon and not the marathon. So I was like, at least let's finish with some dignity, right? So I was saying, come on, at least let's finish running. Let's finish this running. I do not want to enter the finish line. Now I'm sounding like an asshole. Sorry, but you know, you're running and you are so into the race. It's like, come on, let's just finish running. It's there. Don't you see the finish line? It's there. It's there. And the guy was saying nothing. So I was thinking, he's fine. He would tell me. If I'm being an asshole, he would tell me, Marta, you're an asshole, right? So I was putting pressure, and he tried to run. So we finished, we arrived. We crossed the finish line running, and he goes like, puff. The doctor comes, and I'm like, oh my God, asking my husband, right? What is going on in here? Basically what happened is that he didn't have sugar. He was really, really struggling. And because he was really strong and he didn't have sugar, he didn't have the energy to talk to me. And again, this is something that I didn't have too much sugar myself, but it just didn't occur to me that there was an external condition or there was something happening that he was not telling me. And as a consequence, it could have been a real problem, right? So then, the doctor and everything, they were giving him gels, and by the way, he's fine, he's here, he's alive, right? But I was thinking, what have I done here? First, I've put unnecessary pressure on him. Because to be honest, what difference would it make to finish 31 minutes ahead? Is the pressure, it's the effort really worth the outcome? This is something that sometimes we do not look, like the effort versus the value that we get. And we get lost in like, well, we have to make this at the end, this feature, maybe it's not necessary, right? I was not empowering the team. And by not empowering the team, this is something that has happened to me also when I was working. Sometimes as a manager, you say to your team, if there are problems, please tell me. And you assume that the people will tell you. And this is wrong, because some people will tell you. Some people will tell you because their character is to raise concerns, because they feel comfortable, because they know you, because of whatever. Sometimes people will not tell you. And this does not mean that because they don't tell you that they are struggling, that they are okay. So as leaders, I think we have to go the extra mile and check how the team is really doing. Sometimes there are a lot of indicators. They will not tell you, but if you see people who are always in a bad mood, people not communicating, when you ask them, they're saying everything is fine, but you kind of perceive that it's not fine, right? Sometimes we say, yeah, visibility, communication, but there are a lot of ways of communication. And sometimes the non-verbal ones are as important as the verbal ones. And when I was remembering what happened in Greenland, then at work, now, it's like, ooh, Marta, watch out, right? Maybe there are things that I'm not telling you. And also the goal misalignment. For me, it was very important to finish in a good time running. For him, it was just finishing. And this happens, don't tell me it doesn't happen. Like management might have some expectations. What I want is A, B, and C. And the engineering team have A, D, C, and whatever. And as managers, if we can combine the goals, for instance, the engineering team might have the goal of, we want to build a product that is technically sound, that it has good engineering. And management is, I want to build a product that sells well. Because, of course, if this doesn't sell well, we are, sometimes I do say it, right? If this doesn't sell, we are not making money, we cannot pay salaries, then we can do no engineering. Yes, but if my team is not motivated because they do not care about this, if they care about the engineering, you have to find ways to say, okay, so let's not compromise on this. Let's build a good product because this good product is going to make us money, right? So the lessons I learned here were be super careful on the pressure, because this is, do not take for granted that also the way you are performing or the hours that you put at work are the same that everybody is going to put. Everybody has different personal circumstances. You might opt for staying long hours, and your team might not, and that's fine. Empower your team, look for clues, listen, look around, and align your goals. So basically, the lessons I took with me from this, and I would like also to discuss today with you guys, is that it's very important to set achievable and suitable goals, right? Understand your strengths and constraints, to align your goals with the team, make full use of Agile principles to react to change, use this mindset that we have, that other industries do not have. Use the right metrics, please. And then if you see that management is not using the right metrics, educate them. Talk to them. Look, this metric is going to be useless. This is what is really going to work in here. Also, in the metrics, do not assume that the metrics that you use for another project or with another customer are the ones that are going to suit you for the new one. And be a servant leader. Never underestimate the importance of this communication and empowering your team. And with this, I have included a last slide, because last time I gave the talk, they asked me, okay, what's your next goal? And then I explained my next goal, and I did it 3 months ago, and I made use of this, so I want to share it because I'm very happy, right? It works. So we ran the Antarctica Half Marathon 3 months ago, and not only we finished, I even won the female category, but I did right this time. I picked the right distance, it was a half marathon, so the marathon was like, not with my back, no. I used the right metrics, I focused on my legs, right? Not the pace, just my legs, and it worked. And of course, we studied the course, the conditions, the gear, so we did it right this time, and I was very happy. First time I ever won anything, so yes, it does work, I can tell. Good, and with this, thank you very much. That was what I wanted to share with you today. I hope you enjoyed the talk. And I think we have some time, right, for questions or discussions, your own experience. I always like to ask your own experiences because you learn so much. Thank you. And yes, follow me in Instagram or my blog. I write about the gear I use and everything in case you want to know. If you're into running, if not,
Hello, Marta.
Hello.
Thank you for the presentation, and you are a very good experience. Like a leader, I have a question for you. Sometimes you know that during, I do just compare your example, no, Agile and your experience. Sometimes when you have a team, you have to take bad decision to left somebody, no? Mm-hmm. In your experience, how you compare this choice to left somebody during the marathon? Maybe you need to change your stuff because you know that with your stuff you can't finish the marathon. So sometimes it's something that you made in your job, and I think in marathon sometimes you say maybe I have to change something.
Yeah, well, that's obviously it's one of the most difficult decisions you have to take as a leader, right? When you realize that you have to let go somebody in your team. And unfortunately, yes, I have had to do it in the past. I think the most important thing before letting go of somebody is to understand the attitude, right? Because skills you can train. So if it's a question that the person doesn't have the right skills, you can train. Or you can place the person in an environment that is safer and the person can grow. If the person has the right attitude, like the mindset of growing. Sometimes, unfortunately, you find people who might be good technically, but they are not a team player and their mindset is not adapting. So I always like to also give several opportunities to explain the situation and to make very clear the expectations as well, because also it's important for the person to know what is expected. And if the person, after a while, despite knowing what is expected from him or her, and doesn't have the right attitude, then you have to take the decision because they are dragging down the team, and then the team suffers. I'm going to say the 3, 2, 1. Well, thank you very much for attending. Again, it's the end of the day, so now you can go and enjoy. And I'm here if you have like a question you want to ask me in person. If not, see you on some weird ways or in the next DevCon.